Welcome to This Explainer. Okay, if you've been tuning in lately, you know that for weeks, we've been pointing to the exact same conclusion. You need to own your AI stack. We looked at shareholder registers, we checked the hardware capacity, the VRAM, and we meticulously tracked who exactly holds the power to switch your models off. Every single piece of analysis seemed to just perfectly converge on the absolute necessity of AI sovereignty. But, well, here's the thing about total convergence. It should bother you. It definitely bothers me. When that many different analyses reach the exact same verdict, you really have to stop and ask if you're even running an analysis anymore. So today, we're flipping the script. Let's take a fresh look at that exact same data and see if it actually builds the ultimate case against AI sovereignty.
Right off the bat, this isn't some weak straw man argument we're setting up just to easily knock it down. This is the very real, very direct challenge that a smart, pragmatic CTO would slide right across the table at us. The core claim here? For almost everyone, sovereignty is just an expensive hedge against a risk they have completely mispriced. It argues that the single most rational, business-saving move is to simply use the absolute best model available and just get on with building your product. So let's dive in and see if that CTO actually hit the nail on the head.
Here is our roadmap for this explainer so you know exactly where we're headed. We're going to systematically dismantle this piece by piece. First, the overall case against sovereignty. Second, we'll measure the capability gap. Third, the true sovereign tax. 4, fake threats versus real resilience. 5, bound versus performing. And finally, number 6, the router solution. Let's get into it.
Part 1. The case against sovereignty.
Okay, so when you decide to prioritize a fully auditable, jurisdictionally pristine tech stack, you are making a massive trade-off. We've honestly spent a ton of time championing the security of owning the model, but we haven't spent nearly enough time pricing exactly what you lose when you do that. By choosing a sovereign AI model, you aren't just buying security, you're buying a permanent capability discount, and wildly enough, you are paying a premium to get it. You are literally forcing your engineers, your developers, the whole company to accept inferior technology for a benefit that, for the vast majority of businesses, is just entirely theoretical. Let's look at exactly how steep that discount really is.
Part 2. The capability gap. When you look at the performance data, trailing the frontier by, say, 5 points on an index might sound like a rounding error to a project manager. A model being roughly 5 points behind might seem close enough, right? But at the agentic frontier, where AI models are actually executing complex workflows, that margin is absolutely deadly. It is not a rounding error. It is a product failure. It's the difference between an automated run that completes successfully and a run that inexplicably crashes at step 7. And this brilliantly illustrates the stark contrast we're talking about. Look at the software engineering benchmarks. On the SWE Bench Verified scores, Inkling, which is the absolute best American open-weight model shipped with genuine fanfare, posts a 77.6%. Meanwhile, Fable 5, a Frontier Closed model, hits a 95%. The gap on other benchmarks is even worse. On Terminal Bench, a leading open model hits about 63%, while the Frontier is sitting near 90%.
So, what does that gap actually mean for your day-to-day business operations? It translates directly to a 33% failure rate. Roughly a third of your agentic tasks are going to fail on a sovereign model when they would have easily succeeded on a frontier model. And this cost compounds daily. Better models mean an agent completes more tasks. More tasks completed means more work automated, yielding more value per engineer, which leads to faster iteration and, ultimately, a much better product. If you take the sovereign option, you are inheriting this 33% failure rate every single day, forever, because the frontier keeps moving and your sovereign vendor is always going to trail it. Even top executives at leading open-weight companies will flat out admit they don't yet own the best language models, and that results in speeds that make iterative work feel like wading through wet cement.
Part 3. The true sovereign tax.
This builds into an even larger issue, the financial burden. The cost of running your own sovereign stack isn't just some hidden, abstract penalty. This tax has a published rate, if you know where to look for it, and the opportunity cost is honestly staggering. Let's walk through this row by row. First, certification. Getting something like Secnum Cloud is not your standard audit. It's 10 times the complexity of an ISO 27001 certification. We're talking over 360 criteria. In an entire decade, only about 9 or 10 providers have ever even qualified. It's less of a certification and more of a moon program. Next, self-hosting. Right out of the gate, you need half to a full-time equivalent engineer just to keep the cluster healthy. That is 75 to 100 grand a year for an engineer who isn't even building your core product. Finally, the hardware itself. Owned GPUs carry a massive penalty at low utilization. Your floor is $2,000 to $20,000 a month, plus up to 40% extra just to cool the machines. You literally do not break even against standard API costs until you're generating billions of tokens every single month.
And this huge premium completely distorts the broader market. Look at this number, 83x. The Cohere Alpha valuation was priced at roughly 83 times their known annual recurring revenue. That is absolutely not a normal software revenue multiple. That is a pure sovereignty multiple. The market is massively inflating the cost of these companies, forcing you to pay a premium for models that require hundreds of gigabytes of VRAM just to run, which means, practically speaking, you likely couldn't even run these open weights effectively yourself anyway. All of this adds up to a sovereign path that costs way more, ships way slower, performs noticeably worse, and locks you in harder.
Part 4. Fake threats, real resilience.
Take a step back and ask yourself what actually takes companies offline in the real world. It's data breaches, it's ransomware, it's a misconfigured cloud bucket, or a vendor suddenly jacking up their prices. But what does sovereignty actually insure you against? A foreign government compelling your data through a legal order served on your cloud provider. For the vast majority of organizations, that has literally never happened and probably never will. You are essentially blowing your IT budget on insurance against a theoretical legal structure instead of protecting against the ransomware attacks that happen every single day. But the sovereignty crowd loves to point to one apocalyptic scenario to justify all this expense: the sudden worldwide kill switch. And, to be fair, recently that actually happened. On June 12th, a Commerce Department directive pulled flagship models like Fable 5 and Mythos 5 worldwide. The models just vanished.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the duration of this supposed apocalypse: 18 days. By July 1st, service was completely restored. Sit with that for just a second. The absolute nightmare scenario that anchors every single own your stack argument occurred. An 18-day global outage of a flagship model, and guess what? The world didn't end. Fallback models were readily available. If your business cannot survive 18 days of one vendor being degraded by simply routing your traffic to another API, you do not have a sovereignty problem, you have a basic business continuity problem. This whole event didn't prove the sovereignty thesis at all, it proved incredible market resilience.
Part 5. Bound versus performing.
This brings us to a really crucial distinction in the market. It's the difference between buyers who actually need sovereignty and those who just kind of like the sound of it. There is a massive disconnect in the data here. Surveys show that around 72% of European enterprise IT decision-makers cite data sovereignty as a key factor in vendor selection. Yet, market analysts note that the sovereignty argument is genuinely decisive in only about 3 specific verticals. Those 2 stats cannot describe the same reality. So here is the truth. On the left, you have the bound. These are defense ministries, classified programs, hospitals, or banks under strict financial regulations like DORA. For them, a foreign legal order isn't some theoretical risk, it is a hard legal gate. They must buy sovereign, and they should gladly pay the tax, because their alternative isn't a slightly worse model. It's zero deployment at all. But on the right side, we have the performing. This is that 72% of the market. These are companies that have absolutely no legal obligation to be sovereign. They just have a feeling about it. It's a politically legible, entirely unbudgeted feeling. And they are basically playing the role of tourists. And if you're a tourist just performing a preference, you are paying a massive opportunity cost while your competitor uses a frontier API and actually ships products to real customers.
Part 6. The router solution.
So, what's the actionable synthesis here? What is the actual solution for the vast majority of companies, that 72%, who aren't legally bound to sovereignty but want to be smart about resilience? It is incredibly simple, and it completely bypasses those multi-million-dollar data center buildouts. The solution is a router. For about $200 a month, you can set up this super simple stack. First, a model-agnostic gateway. Second, a fallback tier, so if one model goes down, another one spins up instantly. Third, an evaluation harness to ensure that fallback model is actually performing adequately. And fourth, a documented exit strategy. That's it, the whole shebang. This simple 4-step router solution gives you 90% of the resilience for maybe 2% of the cost. It turns an apocalyptic 8-day kill switch event into a complete non-event that your end customers won't even notice. Everything above this, the massive certifications, the expensive own clusters, is really just buying into a narrative.
And that brings us to the final, slightly uncomfortable question you really have to sit down and ask yourself in your engineering team. Run the honest test on yourselves. Are you bound or are you performing? If you are bound by law, you already know it for sure. Go buy the hardware, check the VRAM, and build your sovereign stack. But if you're just performing a preference, stop. Put a $200 router in front of the absolute best frontier model available, spend all of that saved money and time on shipping your actual product, and leave the sovereignty hype behind. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and I'll catch you on the next one.